Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger. This is week 9 of Marshall not joining me to introduce the podcast because we're staying safe and we're staying home due to COVID-19, and we hope that you are too. By now, I hope you've all had a chance to tune into Midtown Radio KW, where we have a new time slot every Friday at 2 p.m. Midtown's going to be playing past Bonn Park episodes and continuing with the new ones as they come out. We'll still be releasing new episodes of Bonn Park every Wednesday. This is just an additional time slot for us. They've got some cool programming, so I hope you check it out. So today on the podcast, we have Dr. Joanna Thiessen. She's a passionate naturopathic doctor at her family practice, Street Naturopathic Medicine in Waterloo. Dr. Joanna is actually a really good friend of mine, and we're looking forward to sharing this episode with you. Her practice focuses on family and children's health, and she uses safe, gentle, and effective natural therapies to help her patients get well and stay well. Let's let her tell you. Here's Dr. Joanna Thiessen. We're here with Dr. Joanna Thiessen, a naturopathic doctor and my buddy.
Yay.
We're happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe, how did you and Sara meet?
So Sara and I met almost 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like I sort of stalked her in a bit of a new mom has no friends kind of a way. So I had just moved to KW and I had my first kid who was a baby, Cedar. And I didn't know anybody in KW. I'm not from here. And I was quite lonely because a 9-month-old doesn't really talk very much or provide much stimulating conversation. So I was on the lookout for mums or just people to be friends with. And I saw Sara coming out of a neighbor's house with a stroller and a baby who looked to be about Cedar's age. And I thought, oh, maybe a mom lives there with a baby. And so I noted the house, and then maybe a week later, I went to the public library, and I went to this mom and baby group again in my search of like, I need to find some friends. And there was Sara in the group. And so right away I approached her and I was like, I think you live on my street. And I think she was like, no, I don't live on your street.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Actually.
And I was like, well, I thought I saw you in a stroller. And anyway, it turns out one of Sara's super close friends lived like 3 doors down from me. And so yeah, that was how we met.
That was it. And so that super close friend was Francine, who I'm hoping will come talk to us one day too. So my version of that story is I'm going to the mommy and me baby thing because, you know, it's good to make your baby talk and sing songs. And then I get a minute at the library to grab some books to make me feel like I still have a brain. And after the baby group, you know, I'm like stayed for the obligatory amount of playtime together. I go to grab Justina and get all my crap. And a mom starts talking to me and I have that reaction that I always had back then, which was, oh crap, are we doing this? Is this what's happening? How old's your little one? You know, oh, right. I'm supposed to ask how old yours is. Okay. And even with that bad attitude, I'm so glad that you approached me because it's been such a beautiful, wonderful friendship that we've had over all these years. Even though over the past few, we haven't seen each other a lot. Our kids are growing up and we don't spend as much time together. And now it turns out when we try to get together, we can't make it work. So we just grab lunch together, which is also really nice. But how amazing that you had that courage to reach out to other moms. Because if not, I never would have met you.
Aww.
Yeah. I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your answer, Marshall.
Yeah, thanks. I remember before I became a stay-at-home dad that I asked a parent, so when you have a child, is it like kind of like having company? Like you have someone with company all day? And they said, no, not at all.
No.
So I laughed when Joe said that.
Yeah.
They don't talk a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marshall was a stay-at-home, work-at-home dad also. And he understands the loneliness.
Yeah, the isolation and the long, dark winters.
Yeah, I felt like the CBC radio I felt like they were my friends.
Yeah.
Like I really was they were my friends.
Or even just a telemarketer.
Yeah, right? It's
two
amazing the
in the
conversation.
afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Her kid would have been sleeping then. Her kid napped.
he was a good napper. It's
I know.
true.
I was insanely jealous of that. But it's okay. It's fine now. My kid naps now. She's 14.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So wonderfully, your career, your professional life ties in nicely with your parenting and vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk about that?
And what brought
Yeah.
you here?
Yeah.
What brought me here to KW?
Mhm.
So we moved to KW really for the house that we moved into, which sounds strange, but we were living in Toronto and we had our first baby, and I was finishing up school and so was my husband. So I did my naturopathic studies there and he went to teacher's college. And we knew we wanted to leave Toronto because it was just too much for us. It was too busy, too sort of hectic feeling, and we knew we wanted to go somewhere out of the city. And we had lived in Guelph for about 5 years, and so we really loved that area, and we thought, oh, maybe Guelph. And then this house that we moved into, which was originally my husband Brooke's grandparents' house, it came up for sale. And it was zoned to have a family home part as well as a business part in the same house. And it just seemed like the perfect fit for us because I was nursing Cedar, and it felt like it would just be great to be able to have my work there as well as, you know, be able to be on site for parenting and nursing and all of that too. So so it was a house that brought us here.
And that neighborhood has a lot of backstory too. You know, it has great big trees and people who have been in their homes for many decades.
Interesting neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And all the houses look different.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah.
They're all unique.
Yeah, and it even has a through the Mary Allen studio tour, like it has its own culture and art scene. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah,
Brooke,
we love it.
Joe's husband is still quite involved in the Neighborhood Association
Yeah.
for Mary Allen.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Which is
He was the chair of it for a number of years and now has a bit of a, backstage role, but very much involved. Yeah.
people use their front porches in your neighborhood, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a big part of socializing. I think in newer suburbs, the architecture kind of has disrupted that way that people
Right.
visit. And
Well, and I think you see in a lot of newer builds, garages where you drive right in and then you just go into the house from the garage, right? And so, you can totally avoid seeing people if that's what you wanted to do.
or the porch
right?
is almost useless. It's just a small little piece of concrete stuff to the side, and
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
enough to
no, I
stand
love
up on.
our porch. The porch at the old house. So we live in a different house now than that house that I spoke of before, but still on the same street. But the first house where we lived in, it had this nice big porch, and Brooke's grandpa used to sit out there in this chair and just kind of watch the street go by, watch the world. And his grandmother had planted these grapevines. So there were these beautiful grapevines that kind of made this canopy up over the porch, and grandpa would sit there on his chair. And yeah, it was a pretty special place.
oh, that's so great to have that history.
We actually took a picture before you, so the house of your family there, and your kids holding a picture of the grandparents
Yeah.
on the front porch. So just
Yeah.
cool stuff. Yeah,
That was
that
neat.
history is amazing. So
And
I kind
then-
of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say in that same photo shoot, if you remember, my youngest, Sky, was born in that house.
Yeah.
And we moved out of that house when she was just a couple weeks old. And so I had Sara take a picture of Sky and of me in the exact spot where she was born.
Oh, I
That
love
was
it.
pretty cool.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I did kind of circumvent Marshall's initial question
okay.
though about balancing work and family life, and that your job really lends to that. So how does that work for you?
Yeah, I
Even
mean,
though I already know.
you know the answer. For me, it's important to have kind of a low stress life and to be around a lot for my kids. And so I'm really lucky I'm able to do that. So I see patients about 15 to 20 hours a week. And I do it, from 9:30 to 2:30 kind of thing, so that I'm there in the morning, help everyone get out the door, which is sometimes feels like an impossible feat to get everyone going. And then I'm there to go pick up the girls at the end of the school day. My two youngest are my girls, and Cedar's my oldest. He doesn't need me to pick him up. He's in high school.
Yeah.
He'd be mortified if I
Yeah,
showed
no kidding.
up there. So it's great because then, we get home from the school at like 3:30, 3:45, and we've got the whole rest of the day and the evening together. And so we do a lot of like cooking together and eating together. And of course, everyone's at the age now where they have certain activities and hobbies they like. And so I'm able to, and Brooke as well, to go with them and, drive them to those things and help them with their homework and all of that. So for us, it feels like that sort of well-rounded, balanced lifestyle is really what for us makes low stress. And so, yeah, it works. It's nice. We love it.
It'd be almost a complete contradiction if you didn't carve out a life like that for yourself.
Right.
Like if it was in the work that you do, if it was hectic and
yeah.
chaotic.
Well, it's true because I counsel people all the time about stress and about, being more mindful and slowing down and taking care of their mental health as well as their physical health. And I do feel like I need to do that for myself for sure. I mean, I'm not perfect and I don't always practice exactly what I preach, but I try my best to, live the way that works well for me and feels healthy for me for sure.
And Waterloo Region seemed like a good fit when you arrived here?
Yeah, it did. It was, it's funny. Brooke, who grew up here, he never thought he would move back here. Like, I think he just sort of, when he left here, it was like,
I'm
leaving
moving
home,
on.
I'm moving on. Like, I've been there, done that. And he never pictured moving back here. And it really, again, was his grandparents' house that pulled us back. But, and we had, we spent some years traveling together and lived in Toronto. And I think Waterloo was probably the last place he thought we'd end up. But we do both really love it here. Part of it, I think, is your immediate community because, we don't live that far away from each other, Sara and I, and yet we never see each other just because, at least where I live, you sort of see the people right around you. And like, I go to the school, so I see people at the school and en route. And then I walk uptown, so I see people on that. But like my radius of, travel in a day is pretty small. So I feel super lucky in that we live around amazing people. So, the kind of people where it's like everyone's watching out for each other, watching out for each other's kids, and someone gets sick and people are coming together to make food, or someone passes away and we have a group of neighbors where we hand make quilts and we give them to people, like neighbors who are in need. And it's just that kind of like, there's just lovely people.
Yeah, and a real sense of belonging that comes with it.
For sure.
Yeah. That connectedness, I think for a lot of people, they don't have that. As what you would have seen huge growth in Waterloo Region since you moved here. And as we sprawl, I think that unfortunately there's a lot of disconnectedness probably as we spread further and further apart. But so I think there's something really special about a neighborhood like yours.
Yeah, I agree.
So living and working in that neighborhood is kind of the key, right? Tell us a little bit about what brought you to naturopathy.
So I always was really interested in medicine and in health. And I always was like, if someone was injured or unwell, I always wanted to know more and, find out the details or be able to help if I could. Or so, health and medicine always really interested me. And I loved, maths and sciences and those kinds of things in school. And I have a lot of medical people in my family. So my grandfather was, very successful, brilliant internal medicine specialist. And my uncle is a pediatrician. He's just retired. And my mom was a nurse. And so I have a lot of sort of that kind of medical side that I grew up knowing about. So part of me always thought that that's what I would do. But there was a part of it, and it was actually mostly the schooling that to me didn't feel like a good fit for me. So the concept of having to work like a 24-hour shift to me just always seemed like I knew I wouldn't be at my best because I'm terrible when I haven't gotten enough sleep. And I just felt like I didn't think I physically could kind of push myself through that. So there was always something that kind of was like, it doesn't quite feel like the right fit. And I didn't know about naturopathic medicine as a career, so I'd never heard of it when I was younger. I certainly knew the concept of different types of medicine. So my mom was interested in plant-based medicines, and so she would treat us sometimes with those. And actually, she had a mail order business when I was a kid out of our house. I remember in the basement, there were all these shelves that were full of like echinacea and black cohosh and like all these plant-based medicines. And this was probably in like maybe the early 90s or the late 80s. And so it was at a time where you couldn't really go to a store and just buy those things. Like now you can probably be in like the checkout at Shoppers and like grab some echinacea off the shelf. But that wasn't the case then. And so she would have these catalogs and people would like mail order and she'd send them these packages with these herbs. And
it's kind of amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. Interesting. So I knew certainly about the concept of different types of medicine. And then when I was at the University of Guelph, I took an elective called Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And a naturopathic doctor came and spoke as a guest speaker. And it was just like this light bulb went off. As she was talking about her job and her training and her profession, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect fit. Right. So I started seeing her as a patient to kind of get that perspective of what is it like. And I loved it. I worked with her as a patient for years. And yeah, that was really it for me.
I love that story about your mom too, with the business that she ran. Because I don't know much about your mom other than that she's a huge football fan.
She is a massive football fan. She absolutely
like I think my husband Steve is a football fan, but no, I think your mom tops it.
She is. Yeah. She is. Yeah. And Cedar, my oldest, he's a chip off the old block of her. Yeah. It's like it skipped that whole kind of hardcore sports football thing, skipped my generation. Although no, my brother. So it's like my mom, my brother, and then my son Cedar, and they have this football pool together. They're like constantly emailing each other, but they're
like CFL or NFL or
CFL, I guess. Wow. It's like whatever's on Sundays and Mondays.
Yeah. Your mom would be NFL also, I think. Isn't
she
a
sorry,
Broncos
I meant
fan?
NFL.
Yeah.
I meant not just the Canadian one.
Right.
Sorry, I am football ignorant. Yeah, like football Sunday is that?
So you definitely don't get this. Like Cedar does not get this from you, because sometimes when he's talking sports stats with Steve, I zone out because I lost Cedar at the first couple of numbers. I have no idea what he's talking about anymore, and I think I see a little wood burning in Steve's oven there too. Like he doesn't know.
I don't understand the rules of football. Like
it's start and then stop and then start again.
Right.
Move this way, move that way.
And then add more time on the clock.
Yeah. I was going to say the clock moves really slowly.
Yeah. And when I'm waiting for my show to come on, it's being delayed.
What show are you waiting for?
Wrestling.
Yeah. Marshall's a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's even doing it justice.
Great.
You're a wrestling historian.
Yeah, and a fanatic. It's part of my life every day. Yeah.
You were quoted in wrestling literature.
Yeah.
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 I don't know much about wrestling, but is it
Marshall does? Just ask.
I guess. Is it like the only wrestling I know is WWF,
That's
and I
the
don't even know it that
wrestling
well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the kind of
the scripted spectacle and weird world of wrestling.
And is any of it real, or is it all like drama?
Well, now this is serious.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is the question.
So all the matches are predetermined and the storylines are scripted, but the physicality in the ring is very real, and they are athletes, I'd say that to anybody, and they measure up with any sport in terms of physicality and talent and injuries. Yeah. And I'm sure they benefit greatly from your line of work as well, in terms of healing and that. And I want to ask you something about, I knew a man who would be at the Garlic Stratford Festival every single year, Stratford Garlic Festival. Do you know who I mean? He was the Garlic King. His name was Ted Maxick, and he lived to be about maybe close to 90. Wow. And he spent much of his life educating people about the benefits of garlic.
So garlic as medicine. Right. I've heard that.
And he really truly believed that garlic could, I don't know if he would use the word cure, but help.
Help almost anything.
Help almost anything. Yeah. Is this the kind of thing that when you began learning about your profession that, or I guess you said your mom already had introduced you in some way, that were those some of the first things that you would have heard about is garlic and...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, a lot of what we learn about is clinical nutrition, but then also plant-based medicines or botanical medicines. So definitely garlic. I mean, it's always good to, I think the most helpful medicines are ones that are, accessible to people. So, even better if they're local and we can grow them here, as opposed to it being some, root that only grows on some mountainside in like Asia or something, right? and something that we can incorporate into our diet. Like, I really think using food as medicine as opposed to, pills and potions. That's my preference. That being said, I take a handful of supplements in pill form. But, I could get a lot of that stuff from my diet, really. Yeah.
Is there a lot of misunderstanding about
naturopathic medicine? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say in the 14 years that I've practiced, I've noticed, a positive change in that regard. So I will now have medical doctors and, family doctors as well as specialists who will refer patients to me, which I always find a great honor, where it didn't used to be like that at all. Certainly when I first started and nobody knew who I was. And then it was a lot, certainly there were no referrals coming from MDs. But nowadays, it's not uncommon for me to get someone will say, oh, I heard about you because my gastroenterologist told me I should come and see you. And so there's been positive change, I think. But, I mean, I think not a lot of people know how naturopathic doctors are trained and how we're regulated. So tell you. Okay.
But before you do, I just want to acknowledge that I'm so glad you kind of brought this up, because I wanted to say to you that I have met family doctors who kind of roll their eyes.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. They say it's kind of woo-woo and hippy-dippy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've had patients who are, they'll say to me, oh, I'm afraid to tell my family doctor that I'm coming to see you.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes
everyone should be communicating.
Right.
Yes,
it's so
especially about your health.
important.
Yeah.
Right. I want to know what pharmaceutical medications you're on, and they should know what other things you're doing. And I really believe in an integrative approach to health. I mean, I have a medical doctor, and I have a chiropractor, and I have an osteopath, and I don't really have a naturopathic doctor. Well, I kind of pick the brains of my friends and colleagues, but I think, there's not one answer that's going to be the right one every time. So there's some times where I need my medical doctor, and then there's other times where I need my osteopath. And I love having a team, and I love being part of people's health team, right? So it's definitely not an all or nothing, I either go natural or I don't. And so I would never want people to view it that way. But certainly I've had over the years, less so in more recent years, but certainly in the beginning, a patient would give me permission to communicate with their doctor to get a copy of their most recent lab work, let's say, for example. And the doctor would, not give it to me, or would just not return my call. So that's, I have run into that for sure. But you know what, it's better now with lab work, because Life Labs now allows you to download copies of your own blood work, your own results. So it's perfect. We don't even have to go through the family doctor to get them. The patient usually comes to my office having already printed them out.
So I feel like I've seen that shift too in the last so many years. Okay, sorry, take it away.
No, I do think it's gotten better.
It's an important topic, I think.
Yeah. Well, so what I was going to say about how naturopathic doctors are trained. Well, first of all, we're regulated in the province of Ontario, and we have, protected title, meaning that you can't say you're a naturopathic doctor or a doctor of naturopathic medicine or an ND or I was going to say naturopath. Maybe you could say that if you spelt it like that. I don't know.
If you had gotten some creative spelling.
Right.
But you can't, unless you've completed
say that
that.
unless you've completed. So it's a 4-year full-time program after you've done an undergrad, basically in biomedical sciences. And then you go on to do this 4-year full-time naturopathic program. You can do it at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine.
That's what I was thinking about, sorry.
So that's in Toronto. That's where I went. There's another school in Vancouver called the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine. And then there are there's either 4 or 5 in the States. You could go to a school there. And then you have to write licensing exams. So there's a North America-wide board exam that would be standardized. So every school would have sort of the same criteria they have to meet. And then you write licensing exams for the province in which you're going to practice. Because every province, because health is regulated provincially, every province determines the scope of practice that they'll kind of let their naturopathic doctors do. So for example, in British Columbia, naturopathic doctors can do minor surgery. So stitches or removal of small things. Whereas in Ontario, that's not in our scope. So you have to write exams that are then specific to the province where you're going to practice. And then we have to keep, every year you have to do continuing education. We have peer assessments. You have to do these self-evaluations. it's pretty, there's like lots of stringent rules for sure. So I think a lot of doctors don't understand that. Maybe a lot of people in general, maybe they think it's like I took a course on the internet or whatever.
Right.
I don't think they realize how intensive the studying is. Like it was 4 really intense, hard academic years.
And finishing the last year with a baby.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Cedar was born in November of my 4th year.
Yeah.
And
That's busy.
I would think something
crazy.
that's a little bit detrimental to it too is there's a lot of terminology out there that finds its way into products as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen it where someone like holistic dog food kind of thing, and people I don't know anything about holistic dog food, but anyways, I'm just saying it's the terminology is out there in all sorts of.
It's been kind of bastardized
on the home shopping channel,
right?
And just it's everywhere.
It's like greenwashing or whatever.
Right. So people don't know what's what. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also this sort of, some people have this preconceived notion that naturopathic doctors are just trying to like sell you a whole bunch of products. And, I would be hurt and offended if any of my patients felt like that about me. I would hope no one would feel that way because, a lot of what I do is, listening and sort of what I would call lifestyle counseling and, offering up suggestions on, dietary changes. And, it's not a lot of like, oh, you need this magic pill. I mean, I think if I had a magic pill, I'd be rich and famous. And I'm not.
Invent it.
I should.
Get to it.
I should.
I'm having this memory about when I was pregnant with my second daughter, Summer, and I was sick from start to finish. Every day, all day. And I remember coming to you with this very personal thought. I was there for an appointment, but we also had set play dates where we would hang out, right? Yeah. But for the appointment, I was telling you, you have to help me. Every single smell makes me want to throw up, although I never do. I just always want to throw up. Yeah. I think I lost like 15 or 20 pounds while I was pregnant with Summer, like so sick all the time. But I said, this is what I need your help with. The worst smell that I cannot stand. Are you remembering this?
I'm remembering this.
I can't stand the smell of my husband. And I love the smell of Steve. Like I smell him all the time. Like, oh, he smells like a boy. Me and Marshall have talked about that and how he does smell good. Marshall calls him perfect 10 Steve. He smells good. Yeah. I couldn't stand the smell of him at all. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Am I losing my mind? And you're like, no, that's a naturopathic thing. You flip through this like book and you're like, it's right here. And we have to do this and we have to do that. And it just felt so comforted that you weren't like, well, that's weird.
Right.
Well, this must be something wrong with you. It was
You're gonna have to move
something
to the garage
my body.
for the next 9 months.
Exactly. But even something as odd as that, like, because I know people are coming to you with serious issues and real health problems and things that they're going through. But even something like that where I was just driving myself
mad. It's a real
mad.
health problem. Part of, feeling crappy and sick every day. And,
I know.
But yeah, I mean, the thing that I think is the best thing that naturopathic doctors have going for us is the amount of time we spend with our patients.
Totally.
Because we're able to really understand a person and understand what's going on with that person. So I often tell my kid patients that I'm like a health detective and that, basically I'm gathering clues. And that's what it feels like. I sit with people for, 90 minutes usually for a first appointment. If it's a kid, an hour. And then follow-ups are, either 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And so it's just, I have the luxury of time to be able to really put the pieces
and connect
together.
the dots, right?
And oftentimes people will say nobody has ever listened to the whole story all at once, because you go into your family doctor and, the appointments are short.
The appointments are short.
There's so many people they need to see.
And my family doctor now has posters hung up that say 1 issue per visit.
Right.
What in the living hell is this all about?
Yeah.
So you have 10 minutes to talk about one thing as though your body are parts in isolation from each other, right? And so I love when I'm like, oh, you have these headaches, but you also don't sleep and, you've told me about your diet and it sounds like you're, eating fast food on the run all the time. And, and I'm able to really put it together. So instead of just being like, oh, you have headaches, take this pill all the time. I can say, let's start with cleaning up your diet and let's look at your sleep practices and what can we shift there. And, let's talk about how hydrated and all of those things. And then people start making these changes to their lifestyle, which are sustainable, because they're not like huge rocket science things. They're often just like little tweaks here and there, but they make a huge difference. So
I'm quite involved at my daughter's school, and something I see often is eczema on kids.
Yeah.
And in the conversations I have with parents about that eczema, it's kind of the same story every time. Doctors tend to shrug at it and go, okay, we don't really know what the source of it is. Could be this, could be that. A lot of kids grow out of it. Anyways, do you find that that's who's coming to you sometime, is someone who says, look, we tried this for eczema. We tried llama oil or whatever. I don't know what all there is, but and then somehow you're able to take an alternative way into that and see if there's something, some way to.
Yeah. Often people will come when they've sort of, they've hit a wall with other practitioners where they just don't feel like they're getting the progress they want to get, right? Or they've been told, here's this solution, try this, and they've tried it and it either isn't working for them, or they don't want to use that long term because maybe there are side effects. Or sometimes people are told, there isn't really much you can do, so you just have to live with that. Like, you have itchy skin. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Just live with it.
Yeah.
And I think that our medical system is really good at like really serious things, like a broken leg. We can handle that pretty well in our traditional medical system, like our allopathic system. But where I think we fail people are those sorts of grievances that aren't life-threatening, but still they are interfering with someone's life, right? So I see a lot of skin concerns. I see a lot of eczema with kids. Oftentimes with kids, it is connected to their diet. So sometimes there's a food that they're eating that's bothering them. Yeah. And the gut health and the skin health are really connected. So we often can trace, if someone has eczema, and I'll listen to their history, and oftentimes they had lots of antibiotics for ear infections. And so then we're wondering about, what's the health of the gut? Like how many, billions of good bacteria did they have or did they not have? And how is that impacting the skin?
Yeah.
Joe, can you prescribe birth control for girls that are having trouble with periods, or maybe who want it? Or is that something you refer to their family doctor for?
So to prescribe actual birth control pills, you'd need to have a family doctor or a nurse practitioner. I'm not sure if pharmacists can prescribe birth control. Pharmacists have some prescribing rights as well. I wonder if they actually can. I don't know.
That'd be interesting. I can check and add it in later.
Yeah, but naturopathic doctors, we have prescribing rights to certain medications, but not to that sort of conventional birth control pill. So we do have prescribing rights to certain individual hormones like estrogen and progesterone and thyroid hormone. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, so, if there was like a youth, so maybe a teen or late teen who was struggling with her period, birth control might be a really great option for her. Sometimes if we're not needing the actual birth control part, then we might try other things first. Right. So there are some herbs that can be used to help with symptoms of, PMS or symptoms of heavy bleeding or, hormonal acne, those kinds of things. And sometimes I'll even use, we can prescribe what's called bioidentical hormone. So bioidentical progesterone in a topical, in a cream. So sometimes I might use that to help with different issues around the menstrual cycle. But actual birth control pills, you would need to see someone who can prescribe those.
Do you get a lot of sexual health questions?
Not a ton through my everyday work. More through
or
my
just
work.
Texts from friends.
More, exactly. Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say through the work that I do with the teens, with James Bay Girls at Bat. Yeah. We do, at our camps that we go to, we do an Ask Me Anything box where, anonymously youth can write questions, and they can be about anything. It's supposed to be kind of about your health, about your body, about sex, about periods, about pregnancy, whatever. So I do get to, kind of answer a lot of sexual health related questions that way. But in my everyday job, I do see a lot of, women with different concerns around their menstrual cycle or people trying to get pregnant. I see a lot of that for sure. And naturopathic medicine can really help. Even, it can be used as a treatment on its own, or it can be a really nice complementary treatment to, IUIs or IVF cycles, those sorts of things. So, yeah.
I seem to remember you were doing some clinics for fertility health also. And how did you get into doing that? And was that sort of a one-off thing that you did?
So there are a couple fertility clinics in town who are, really open and interested in, a more integrative approach as opposed to just a pharmaceutical approach.
More like looking for that team that we were talking about.
Yeah. So I've had an opportunity to work with some great doctors in this area. And, I really think that team approach is so important with something like fertility, because there's a huge stress part with a fertility journey. And, I think
the last thing you need, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. It's one of those catch-22s or whatever, where it's like stress impacts fertility negatively, and yet fertility treatments create a lot of stress, right? So, I've never met a person going through a fertility journey, like a, fertility clinic kind of journey, who's just been like super chill and calm about the whole process. It's a very inherently stressful process. So I always love to be able to provide, acupuncture and just nice, like gentle, really supportive therapies to go along with a lot of the kind of, a lot of the fertility procedures. They're awesome when they result in you having the baby that you've dreamed of having. But along the way, there's a lot of poking and prodding and timing of things. And,
You use the word gentle, which I think is really neat, because I was thinking how there's a much more gentle, dignified approach to this way. I think with commercials nowadays and selling medicine, they can be very, like the one I can think of is, did you know that 90% of all erectile dysfunction is not a psychological, but a physical something, right? And then it ends with improve your sex life and your confidence. And it's actually a real turn off. It's kind of like
a hard sell.
Yeah. And this will cure you, like the way they present it kind of thing. And I think this is so much more relatable, that like maybe the approach needs to be a gentler one, and one that's where you consider lots of things and you don't present it like I've got the cure for you.
Do you think that's more of like a stereotypical, like, let's do the hard sell for the men and the gentle flowing sell for the ladies?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because, I don't ever see like a tampon commercial that's like, plug that period. We can do it. We'll fix your problem now. It's like, I would probably relate more to one like that myself.
Right.
But
it's
fact,
usually
they're
like
very
ocean
subtle.
waves and women in like a flowy
Riding on a bike.
running on the beach.
Although
or
I'm very impressed with how companies like Thinks, and this is not an ad, but it could be Thinks. Companies like Thinks or Diva Cup are doing away with the blue liquid in their ads. So online ads are just like, this is what it looks like and this is what you're going to be dealing with kind of thing, and letting people know. But I wonder if some of that has to do with like, let's
who
get this
they're trying to market towards.
What the marketing is for. Yeah.
What age groups are we talking about in terms of, like, I know lots of kids kind of rounds, but how old would some of your older
patients
be? Yeah.
So, really, I see patients of all ages. So I would, I see right now there's a few women that I'm working with that are in their mid 70s. I'm not sure that there's anyone older than that I'm working with right now, but I have in the past for sure had people in their 80s, and then, all the way down to like brand new newborns.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say most common would be women, because I think most healthcare practitioners would say that they more commonly see women than men. I think that's just a thing across the board.
Oh, I can't drag Steve to the doctor even if he has to see one.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's very common for sure. And I would say between the ages of, 30 to 50. Yeah. That's kind of like the most common age group I would see. But then I also, I have people who are university students who are like 19 who come to see me for different reasons.
Yeah.
And, men in their 50s who come to see me for different reasons. So, yeah.
And I guess because too, an appointment with you doesn't necessarily mean stripping down, and being a smock every time or whatever, but rather sometimes it's more about a conversation and
absolutely,
and you gathering information.
For sure.
Yeah.
Certainly a first visit is, there's always some part of physical exam, but whether that's, just taking someone's blood pressure or, I'm always sort of paying attention as I'm talking with someone, just having a look, at their skin and their eyes, and you can gather lots of clues just by looking at people. And but it is very much, my office is, I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's a really nice space to be in. So we sit and drink tea and talk. It's that's sort of what an appointment looks like. And I have, an area where kids can be playing. So when I have parents there with young kids, the kids are playing in the, play kitchen right beside where we're talking. And oftentimes the kids are used to getting needles when they go in to see doctors. So oftentimes kids are a little, they're unsure of me at first. Yeah. And I often will, open up by saying, like, I'm not going to give you a needle today, I promise you. And then they sort of calm down a little bit. And by the end of the visit, oftentimes parents are like having to drag their kids out because now they're having so much fun and they love it there. And I think you feel good when you're there.
Yeah, they're not left with this lifetime of trauma, what I mean? I remember being a child and the doctor like grabs your head like it's a piece of cabbage in the supermarket, like looking at it,
right.
Like, just way too close and too abrupt and too
too naked.
Yeah. And with kids, I always try, because I do a lot of physical exams too, or I do what I call well child visits. Yeah. So, once a year, I have lots of families I work with who would see me once a year, and we'd sort of do an overview of, how is everything going? And, when the child is young, I'm having that conversation mostly with the parent, but then as the child grows, the conversation is with the child and, what kinds of foods are you having for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, and how's school going? And, tell me about how, bedtime feels for you and what's your sleep like? And just, asking lots of things about their life. And then we do the physical exam, and I'm always, wanting them to be really comfortable. So, not having them disrobe any more than they need to, certainly. Yeah. So like if I'm listening to their back, I'm, kind of having them keep their shirt on and putting my stethoscope under their shirt, because you need to be right against their skin to get the proper, to hear it properly. But, a girl who's 11, she doesn't necessarily want to be like sitting there in the office, with disrobed.
Exactly. You were mentioning earlier your work with James Bay Girls at Bat. I want to talk about that. We want to know all about what you do, how you got into it, what you're bringing. I mean, it's quite obvious just talking to you about what you're bringing from your professional field to that group. And then I'm so interested about this like question box. I know you've told me about that before, and how the girls end up feeling comfortable. If you can, let us know everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
All right. So James Bay Girls at Bat is a program that's funded through the Jays Care Foundation. So when people go to the Blue Jays game and buy 50-50 tickets, the money goes to the Jays Care Foundation, and they support programs for vulnerable youth all over Canada. So this program was started in late 2016. And the way I got involved is that my best friend from childhood, Jules Porter, is the director of programs at Jays Care. And she was telling me about this program that she was starting up and that she was involved in the creation of. And she had worked previously with Right to Play, and she had done a lot of work with Right to Play in different First Nations all around Northern Canada, basically. And so when she moved to Jays Care Foundation, I think she felt that, while they were doing awesome things for, vulnerable youth in Toronto community housing and in sort of like inner city areas, they really weren't doing anything in remote First Nations. And when you look at the stats of, suicide rates and addiction rates and there are some huge issues in remote First Nations. And so she wanted to start this program to help support. This program is specifically for teen girls. And so she told me about it, and it sounded really neat. And she said, "We're looking for mentors. Would you consider applying as a mentor?" And I was like, well, I don't know anything about, I don't work in the kind of field that she works in. And I've never worked with First Nations youth. And I mean, I see youth in my practice, but certainly I don't only work with youth. And and I didn't really know much about the different, challenges and concerns, no more than anyone else who just listens to the news. And so I thought, well, I don't not really sure that I'd be the right person. And she said, we just want caring adults. Like basically
That's you.
a mentor in this
Yeah.
program is a caring adult, and you're a caring adult. You should apply. I was like, okay. So I applied, and a close friend and neighbor in Mary Ellen neighborhood, my friend Rachel, she at the same time was looking for some kind of volunteer thing, kind of, you know, she had some time on her hands and was like, I really want to put my time to something, but I want it to be something I feel really good about. And I said, well, I'm thinking of applying for this thing. You know, why don't you learn about it and see? So we both applied and we both became mentors at the same time. And it's this really cool program. Basically, as we're called national mentors because there's other people who are local mentors who live in community with the girls. And basically our job is to be a caring adult in their lives. And so we keep in touch with them through, you know, usually through Facebook or different forms of social media. And we go to retreats, which are kind of like leadership camps for the girls. So twice a year, all the girls from the 12 different communities that are in the program, they all come south and we go north and we meet at a camp, like an outdoor education facility or whatever. We've done a few different sites. We've had 6 retreats so far. And we spend, you know, sort of 4 or 5 days together doing, you know, team building kind of activities, leadership activities, even things like high ropes courses. And we were at this place last time where they had this big water slide, so the girls got to do that. And, you know, there's just this amazing connecting that happens between the girls. And the girls all live in, you know, fly-in only reserves. Not all of them, actually. There are a couple of the reserves, like near Cochrane, where you could drive to. But primarily it's fly-in only reserves like Attawapiskat and Kasheshewan and Fort Albany and Peawanek. And so when you live in a community that's small and that's remote, it's really cool when you get to connect with other people from similar, but, you know, not exactly from your community. It just sort of expands your circle of connections and of support. So yeah, we go to these camps and it's always really, really fun and inspiring and just amazing things happen. And it's been neat to be a part of the program from the beginning. So
that's what I was going to ask. Like, what sort of positive changes? I mean, it's quite obvious what can happen because being a reliable, caring adult in a child's life is only going to bring good, really. But or a young woman's life also. But what kind of positive changes have you seen since you've been involved in the beginning?
So I'd say 2 of the biggest things would be a really positive shift in the support I see the teens offering each other online. So when I see, you know, a teen make a post about how she's having a rough day or she's down on herself, and then I see that all these other youth in the program have commented and have been like, you've got this, you're beautiful, you're amazing. It's just like, it's so heartwarming to see.
Or that might not have been the response that you saw.
Right.
Maybe early 2016.
For sure. And certainly in the beginning part of the program, it would have more been, you know, mentors responding, being like, you got it, you're great. But it just means so much more coming from your peers, I think. Yeah. And so that would be one thing, which has been awesome to see. And then the second would be just the growth and increased self-confidence in some of the girls who have been part of the program from the beginning. So at each retreat, there's often new girls who are just joining the program, but there are some girls who have been there since the very beginning. And there's a few of us mentors who have been there since the very beginning as well. And so it's just been so cool. Like I remember at the very first retreat, some of the girls didn't have the confidence to say their name out loud. Like we went around in a circle, you know, hi, I'm Joe, hi, I'm whoever. And it would come to them and they had, you know, hoodie up and just like stare down until you kind of went like, okay, like we'll come back to you. Or a friend beside them said, oh, she's Alana or whatever, you know. And then these same girls are now the MCs at the talent show on the last night of retreat. And it's just so cool to see
growth.
that change.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the girls are awesome. They're so inspiring. And I really feel like I learn way more from them than they learn from me.
That sounds like really important work.
Yeah.
You guys are doing.
Yeah. No, it's a really special thing to be a part of.
I often wonder when you meet a teenager, some of them, what is it that shaped them to be so tragically insecure at that point? Like what environment are they in, or I know you don't have the answer to any of that, really, but
part of it is just there's something inherent about teenagerhood. Like I feel like I was very fortunate in, the loving family I grew up in, and I grew up in a really supportive community and neighborhood, and yet I think I was so insecure in high school. And even now when I go to my son's high school, I feel it again because it reminds me of my high school. It looks
a weird
the same.
time.
And when I walk in there, I almost feel like I'm 16 and I'm so unsure of myself again. It's weird.
I can't imagine going through that time. I want to be respectful here. I can't imagine going through that time in your life as a young person, trying to figure it all out and feeling all kinds of new things and dealing with the stresses of school and work and family and whatever that might be, but also putting in like an environmental factor that you didn't ask for. Like, so where you're born is going to impact those choices before, or those feelings or thoughts before you even really realize what's happening, right?
do you think about how right now in 2019, almost 2020, the path you chose, you're actually in a really good place at a really good time that supports the work you need to do. And what I mean is, we're constantly, like, just in the past year, plant-based foods are really becoming, and I just see things getting better. I've watched, where you couldn't find tofu in the supermarket in 1990, but now it's like,
now it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I never imagined we'd be here, and something like there was a organic food store in Uptown Waterloo that was there for a long time. And then there are many variables as to why they're not there, probably. But one of them is, I think, the fact that a lot more people got on board with what eating well organically was doing, which is unfortunate for them, but it's a benefit to everybody else.
We also lost the natural food market too, which was my favorite.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you must feel quite supported, as opposed to if we took you back in time 20 years ago, that support wouldn't quite be there.
For sure. Yeah. It's a great time to be a naturopathic doctor. It's a great time to be, sort of a modern day hippie, for sure. Absolutely. And I mean, eating well organically, when we were talking about how we met, and I said the CBC radio were my friends, the other people who were my friends were the people who worked at Eating Well.
Because you were
I
in there.
would go there every day just for someone to talk to.
So you go on Monday and you forget tomatoes on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can go back on Tuesday.
And then I would pack my groceries so slowly so I could linger in conversation with Eileen or with whoever else was working that day. And they were the friendly faces of my neighborhood.
You mentioned modern day hippie. I think I need you to tell everybody how you and your family spend your leisure time.
So we have Alice, who's kind of like another family member, but she's actually a 1976 VW camper van. She has a total personality and she's fantastic.
Think about how your kids will reminisce about that too, like decades from now.
Oh,
right?
Totally.
Yeah. She's, one of the things I love about Alice is that she doesn't like to go very fast. And so
this is a theme for your life.
This is.
Yeah, I like
slow it down.
Yeah.
So everywhere we go in Alice, you take the slow route. Like we would never go on the 401.
Right.
So we drove to Ottawa for Canada 150 and I can't even remember how many hours it took us, but we went like this journey through, the Kawarthas and all back roads, and we camped halfway because we had to split up the trip because it was so long. And you see these little towns that you never would have gone through before had you not been in Alice. And
you probably attract a crowd because she's beautiful.
All the time.
And then all these beautiful blonde babies come rolling out of it.
Yeah. No, you make friends wherever you go. And it's amazing how many people have a memory about a VW van, whether they owned one or their family rented one summer or their uncle had one and they used to play in it or whatever. And you hear these stories when you're filling Alice up with gas, people come and talk to you. And
I think even beautiful. Things in pop culture, conjures up images like Scooby-Doo and all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. That's right.
Yeah, because I think it must be very challenging to work in a field where a lot of people don't quite understand what it is you do, you know, and to the point where some people even like may comment on it as though it's like astrology or something, you know, which I know lots of people believe in astrology, you know, and I think the most heartfelt thing we talked about tonight was the way those girls' lives are changing. And so I want to know what happens when those girls are out of their teen years. What are their options there for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of the girls would go on to college. So some of the girls who are in our program, you know, they started in the program when they were in grade 11, and now since the program's a few years old, they're in college. And it's really cool because a few of them have come back to help at the retreat. So they'll come back and they'll do like childcare. For some of the youth have babies, or some of the mentors or chaperones come with their kids or babies. And then these, you know, graduates of our program who are studying, you know, early childhood education or whatever at college, they're able to do childcare during the day for other, you know, people at the retreat. So, yeah, it's really, really awesome to see that. So a lot of the girls would go to college.
And they really get it. There's choices for them. We were talking about isolated outports on Newfoundland, South End especially. But these girls understand that there's lots of choice for them, and there's a whole world out there.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that they do, for sure. You know, there are also really strong ties to home and to the land. And, you know, I think that a lot of them will, if they go to college, you know, a lot of them will end up coming back to their communities because, you know, that's where they're from. Some of the communities that we work with, the youth would need to leave to go to high school even, because there's no high schools in the community. So at, you know, Justina and Cedar's age, they're like billeting with a family or whatever, right? Or maybe sometimes they have an aunt or someone who lives in, you know, North Bay, and they can go and live with them. But it's really tough. If you don't have a high school in your community and you need to be, you know, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away, it's very tough.
So where can everybody find you?
Well, on George Street. So I have a website. It's georgestreetnaturopathic.com. And I have an Insta handle. Is that what it's called?
It is.
It's at George Street ND, and the word street is written out. And that's also my Twitter handle. And my George Street Naturopathic Medicine has a Facebook page as well.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, Joe.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
We really had fun having you here. Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.